Welcome to For Every Response, the podcast from Emergency Services Times, sponsored by MSA Safety. In this series, we bring you sessions from the Emergency Services Show and the Emergency Tech Show 2025. Catherine Levin hosts this episode, which looks at how to navigate cultural transformation, drawing on the experience of fire services in Cumbria and Essex. Joined by Juliette Alban-Metcalfe from Real World Group, they look at how behavioural-based leadership and culture change can take root in operational high-stakes environments and how to create lasting, authentic impact.
I'm Juliette Alban-Metcalfe. If it's okay, I'll introduce myself first and give you a little bit of context about Real World Group. So we're a 25-year-old company that's been supporting fire service, ambulance, police, different aspects of the public sector and the private sector, and in different countries too, to basically help take the pain away around leadership and culture, and really help from the very top of the organization people to understand just how fundamental it is to achieving any of the things that we're here to achieve as an organization. So, without the right leadership, without the right culture, it can either enable you to achieve your vision and your mission for serving the community, preventing fires, and saving lives, or it can be a disabling factor. And isn't that a tragedy? Because so often, unfortunately, the culture isn't where it needs to be. So we're really, really passionate about this. And we're really, I'm looking forward to telling you some of the stories that we have, or not necessarily stories, but answering some of the questions and giving you a bit more information about how it is that we help people to transform culture. There's also a white paper on the chairs, which my colleague will happily share with you, which provides a bit more detail. It's intended as a kind of generic how-to guide, starting to think about how to shift the culture. It's specifically written for the fire service, but the same challenges in different shapes and forms. I just realized I recognize people in the audience. Hello. Are the same for any organization. So please don't feel that you're alone. Of course, you've got your sector-specific nuances and structures and processes and culture and all those kind of things. But leadership and culture challenges are the same the world over. So, and please do feel free to visit us at our stand later on if you'd like more information from us. But I would like to hand over now to my colleagues who've got far more interesting and important things to say about leadership and culture. So first of all, Kay, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are?
Hi, everyone. So my name is Shelley, and I head up the learning and development for Essex Fire and Rescue, one of the biggest fire and rescue services in the country. I have been with them now for just under 6 years, coming from a corporate world. And my passion is all about leadership and development. So I am in a very privileged position where we've been spearheading some new leadership programs and some new initiatives within the service that I hope to share with you a bit later.
Brilliant. Thank you. And Colin?
Hello, everyone. Yes, my name's Colin Wright. I've come down from Cumbria Fire and Rescue Service today. So a large geographical area, but a small community within there, and a small fire service as well. My story with the fire service set off in 1997, and I have worked, and I still work as an on-call firefighter, and gradually worked through the organisation. And I currently am the group manager for the Learning and Development Department, which is a massive honour for me to be able to lead a department like that. I've come through various educational type businesses. So I worked in the outdoors for a long time, teaching people. So teaching people in the fire service is a short step away from teaching people in the outdoors for me. Again, really passionate about leadership, really passionate about teaching people and changing behaviours. So that's why I'm here today.
Thank you. So what I thought would be really useful and hopefully reassuring to you all in the audience would be to hear from our colleagues in the fire service about what they think are the key leadership challenges that they see in the fire service more generally, and of course specifically in their own services. So would you, and also let's talk about, let's not forget to talk about, we'll talk about the light points as well, of what's the best about the work that you do. But if we start with perhaps the challenges around leadership, and Colin, do you want to go first with it?
Yeah, I think that the challenges that we see in Cumbria have probably the same sort of challenges that we see across the various emergency sectors, but around making sure we've got the right people in the right places with the right skills is part of it. But this conversation that we've been having for a lot of years now around the culture that happens within our emergency services is really important. And those of us that work there kind of understand the culture, but probably also understand that the culture has needed to change in the past and it still needs to change in the future. And that's what we're persistently being told. And I do understand that. I get it. Some places probably more than others. We feel we have a really good culture in Cumbria. It works well. But equally, I'm not so naive to think that there aren't some parts of Cumbria that we need to do something about the culture in there and change. So that's a big sort of challenge for us in the service and for the sector to keep that moving forwards in a positive direction.
Thank you. Hey,
I think for us, absolutely right. But it is about culture. It's also about that inclusion piece. And actually, we can say that everyone has a voice, but actually giving them a voice and proving how that works. I think also leadership is a word, and it's not a one size fits all. So it's really understanding what we want from our leadership, listening. It's about that effective communication and then doing something with that communication.
yeah. So, on that note, I want to give Colin the chance to go first, if that's okay. But so can you tell the audience what is it that your organisation is doing actively to start to address some of the leadership challenges that you face?
So as an organisation, we're in quite probably a new space with this. We traditionally, probably like a lot of emergency services, have done quite a good job of training people in an operational sense and making sure that they know how to use the tools. They know how to be an incident commander, perhaps, and all that kind of stuff. We're really quite good at that. But certainly for us as Cumbria Fire Service, we're on a journey at the moment of doing something around the leadership piece and making sure we start to develop that. We're good at promoting people from a firefighter into a crew manager, but not actually giving them the skills to be that manager very well. And that comes from a place where we've moved from being part of the county council. The county council for us had charge of a lot of that function about developing leaders to a place where we're now under the PFCC. The PFCC means that we're an individual organisation away from the council, so we've lost that support that we did have from the county council. We need to develop this side of the organisation for ourselves. So we're in that space at the moment of going, how do we do the whole organisational development piece whilst keeping going with the operational stuff that we know quite well? And part of that, is work that we've done from top down of embedding 360s, which we used Real World Group to do. It worked really well for our top leaders, and our top leaders came and effectively poked the people in my position when you need to get this to move down the rest of the organisation somehow. And that's the kind of place that we're at now. There will be lots more that we need to do around the leadership space for us, but this is a little bit of a start for us, and it's going quite nicely.
That's great. And it can be difficult to socialise things like 360. So seems like you're making great progress.
Yeah.
I know that Kay, your service is, and I hope Colin won't mind me saying this, is kind of, it feels a bit more advanced. You've been doing 360 for longer. So can you tell us about what sort of things your organisation does to address leadership?
So we started with TLQ 360 back in 2020, and we put all of our service leadership team through it first. But actually, it was available for all. So anyone that was showing an inkling to look at leadership, and we addressed their development, were actually offered the opportunity for TLQ 360. Leadership has to start with yourself. You have to start with self-awareness, and actually you have to take some of that feedback. So by doing that 360, you are picking your reviewers, but be mindful that you want that full story. Be brave, be courageous, and get those answers. You're then working, you have a fundamental base to work from, and you can start to develop your own leadership style. And as I say, we've been doing that since 2020. Our SLT colleagues go through it every 3 years, and they actually then do a team TLQ as well. However, what we've done this year is we've gone one step further, and we're actually now adopting the FRS 360, which is specific to the NFCC 360 leadership framework. We have also trained some of our own staff to be the facilitators of that 360. So they will be coaching each other. It will be very contextualized to the service. We've worked really hard on our leadership program, again, listening to what people want and need in order for us to hit what we want for our CRMP, our Community Risk Management Plan, for the next 4 to 5 years. And we've gone in at different levels, and we've listened to what people have had to say, and our own people have helped us build our leadership program. We have tried a number of off-the-shelf programs. We've actually selected a provider and worked with the provider now for the past 12 months and really contextualised it to the service, taking into account all of our staffing requirements, both our whole-time and on-call colleagues, but our support structure as well. What we find works extremely well is that shared learning with people and bringing their own leadership thoughts to the different forums. We are just about to close out year 1 of the leadership program, and we've put 120 people through it quite successfully.
Fantastic. And also, I think what people are really interested in is like, what are you doing to sort of secure, the leaders of the future, and making sure that when you recruit people, they have the right approach and attitude. And you were talking earlier on about some changes to the watch manager situation. Would you mind telling us a bit more about that?
So again, listening to feedback, we have created a new promotion process for our crew and watch managers. We have had a leadership program running now again since 2020. And it was elective. People didn't have to do it, but it was an opportunity for them to work on their own development against the NFCC framework and looking at our core values and behaviours. It would take people about 6 months to go through and work through that process, but at the end of it, they're ready for role. So when opportunities come up, they also get an opportunity to do temporary work or a day in the life of. So we have now looked at our promotional process, and what we have done is, as part of that assessment, we have our operational, and we'll always have that operational element, but we've now brought leadership and people management into that whole process. So we are assessing and supporting the whole package as a leader and not just on the operational fireground.
That sounds great. That's really impressive. Is there anything you wanted to add, Colin, around, like, so for example, how do you make sure that when you're promoting into or recruiting for leadership roles that people have the right sort of values and attitudes to?
I think it's somewhere where Cumbria is moving forwards towards where Essex is. So we lag behind some of what Kay is doing. So no, I'd like to just taste down what Essex is doing, really.
Yeah, no, it sounds really very impressive, doesn't it? And so, what are there specific plans for the future that you think the audience would find useful to learn about what you're doing in terms of what your thoughts are about strengthening the leadership further in your organisations?
So I think for us at the moment, it's that journey around the 360s and gradually getting that to embed within the organisation. We have a similar experience to Essex in that we set off with Real World Group doing all the feedback to our senior managers, and actually they came back to us with a much better model for us of going train your own accredited feedback facilitators, and then you can do that within your own organisation. And that's where we're at the moment of getting that system up and running and getting those people accredited, which was earlier in the year, and starting to use them, and then start to see that trickle down through the organisation. And we hope, within the next 12 months, we'll start to see that benefit of people being through 360s, people being more self-aware about their own leadership, and then gradually moving the organisation forward from there.
Sounds great. And Kay, what about, I know you're in the midst of, I hope it's okay to mention you're about to go through HMIS, CR4S inspection again.
Yeah, we're on round 4 inspection now. So our documents have gone in, so we're right in the middle of that at the moment. But I think where we are heading to now really is starting to join up a lot more of the dots. So as I said right in the beginning, leadership isn't just a thing. It is around the cultural changes that we have. It is about doing what we say we'll do and holding leaders accountable. But it's giving them the skills and development that they feel confident that they can do that. So we continue to build on our leadership programs. So as I say, our success at the moment is with crew and watch manager level. We're now going to be looking at station manager level. So we're going to do that bit in the middle. So we use NFCC for our executive leadership and our strategic leadership. But now we're going to look at that bit in the middle and what does that look like? And again, we will use our people to help us shape that.
This episode of the Emergency Services Times podcast is sponsored by MSA Safety, proudly supporting emergency services and first responders on the front line. At MSA Safety, protecting first responders isn't just what we do, it's who we are. We work closely with fire and rescue services across the UK to develop and deliver safety solutions designed to meet your ever-evolving needs. That includes MSA Bristol Firefighter PPE, trusted by services across the UK and beyond, shaped through years of collaboration with frontline teams. It also includes our growing investment in innovation and technology, from the connected M1 SCBA modular solution to our agile, fully managed service model that helps keep crews protected and ready to respond. But for us, safety goes beyond equipment. We believe in standing shoulder to shoulder with the people who dedicate their lives to protecting others, whether it's supporting firefighter charities, backing mental health initiatives, or showing up for community events. MSA is proud to be part of the Emergency Services family. To learn more about our work in the UK and how we're supporting first responders every step of the way, visit www.msasafety.com. With MSA Safety, when you go in, we go in with you.
Okay, so I hope that was useful food for thought about, we've got loads more to say about leadership and changing culture, but we wanted to, before we launch into more stuff, we wanted to sort of ask, are there any questions that you have as an audience? And can you still hear me at the back? Yeah. Any questions that you've got, or what are the sort of dilemmas that you're facing around leadership in your organisation that you'd like us to sort of offer our reflections on?
In regards to the 360 you mentioned previously, you stated that for your own 360 you're picking on who's reviewing you. Is there an element of the kind of a random selection, so it isn't necessarily you're just picking, because as you stated that you need a level of bravery to get a very rounded review of yourself. Is there anything in place for maybe the managers that aren't quite that brave yet but still need to have that evidence of a rounded view of how they manage?
I think what our experience has shown, and as I say, it is about that confidence. So before anyone embarks on a 360, we do an induction piece with them as to what to expect and how they can get the best from a 360. We are our own worst critics, so you will do that self-assessment piece first. And then we invite you to ask your line manager, your peer group, actually, some people that you may just aspire to, who you would value their feedback. And you can go externally outside of the organisation. What that results in then is a report that will show you some key areas that you may want to build some of your objectives on. And as I say, my experience has shown, and I've done it myself, is you are your own worst critic. It is about being brave. It's anonymous. And as I say, there are a number of graphs and objectives that you will be talked through. We all go to that end page because that's where the comments are, and we're thinking, who's kind of saying that? But actually, when you take it, and that's why it's really important, and we talked about accredited facilitators, it's really important that you have that coaching session when you have that report in your hand to help you work through those objectives.
Yeah. I should probably have explained when I introduced myself at the beginning that we're an organisation of chartered occupational psychologists. So what what we apply with our 360 tools is best practice. And like, in an ideal world, you'd have a situation where people felt so psychologically safe and, there was such a growth mindset that, didn't make people fearful, that people would have open 360s. We'd give each other 360 feedback on an ongoing basis. Perhaps the second most ideal one is that people just feel open and feel comfortable giving people challenging feedback. But of course, the reality of most organizations, and I've yet to meet one that it has that kind of culture in 25 years of this work we do, people don't have the confidence to either accept feedback because of the consequences, the potential consequences, or to necessarily be honest and give the feedback they want to give. So what we do is we use the very best practice in 360, and what's what we advise organizations that adopt our 360s. And the best practice is that when you're in those early stages of developing the culture, it's really important that you create that sense of safety for an individual. So first of all, as Kay mentioned, the people giving you feedback will be anonymous within a group. But to your point, you need to be able to choose your reviewer so that you can't make an excuse and say, well, hang on a minute, I got this feedback that isn't very complimentary. Who are they anyway? They don't know me, or they've got it in for me. The problem is because our natural psychology is to self-protect. We protect our ego, and so our natural inclination is to reject feedback that's less positive. So if you do it this way, where people choose their own reviewers, the reviewers know that they have that safety in numbers. Those are a couple of there's a number of mechanisms you use to try and get the honesty and feedback. But it's really important to do it that way, and then hopefully that builds people's confidence that then next time round, perhaps they can ask a wider group of people that might be even more, let's say, for want of a better, constructively critical, or whatever it is. But it's an easing in process, and it's creating the conditions that people can't say, well, they don't know me, or, who was it anyway? So it's the science behind it.
Hello. I'm not in the fire service, I'm in the NHS, but just a question in terms of when you're defining leadership, what level of staff are you targeting? Is it the operational leadership, tactical leadership? I didn't really get the sense that this was more strategic leadership, because I do think that's a bit much for learning and development to kind of tell the execs what to do. But for example, if you were thinking about in an incident, like just a normal firefighter would be a leader for the community in terms of telling people what to do. But then you'd take it up the next level of like, we've got the team manager and then the silver commander or something like that. So is there a specific group that you're targeting with this leadership, and does it change by group to group?
Do you want to go or do you want me to go?
So it's across the whole of our organisation effectively. Agree with you that our firefighters to a certain extent are leaders all the way through the organisation, but it's not a one size fits all either. There's different levels of 360 that we can use for the correct level in the organisation, and we'd have that conversation with people and make sure that we selected the right one for them. And obviously, as you at the firefighter level, there's probably less contact with external organisations, so we wouldn't expect so much as that. But at the senior leadership level, then obviously they are involved with external partners a lot, so there should be people that they go and ask for that as well. And just I think a point to clarify about the questionnaires that get sent out to those people that you choose, they're really simple questionnaires. It's not onerous in terms of lots of handwriting, lots of typing in. It's a quick process, so it doesn't sicken people when they're having to fill these questionnaires in. They can get through them reasonably effectively, reasonably efficiently. Does that answer your question?
I think we've do you want to add anything to that question?
No, I think that's fine.
So when we talk about leadership, and obviously I know Colin and Kay's approach to leadership quite well now, having talked to them worked with them for a long time. But it is absolutely, as Colin said, it's about every level of the organisation. How you intervene, as Colin said, needs to differ depending on what the level is, whether they are more outward, more strategic, or whether they are, more of a frontline leader. But, all of the sort of in any sector, leadership has got to be something that every single person in the organisation takes responsibility for. And thinking of the NHS, we've done lots of research around high-performing teams in the health service. And when you look at the model of team working that creates the most innovation, change readiness, and performance, it's where people with no leadership, formal responsibility are absolutely leading, in that team and behaving in ways that generate or that demonstrate their ownership of the critical outcomes and not looking to their leaders to do that for them, but they're actually taking ownership for whether it's team dynamics or how they treat patients or the community. So I don't know, but is that your conception of leadership too?
No, that answers my question. I just wondered, because I wasn't sure of the specifics of the 360 program, whether you were targeting specific people or. So, I mean, I guess if the strategic people are coming to you actively and saying, this is what I think is a gap, then that's really good to hear. So, yeah, thank you for the answers.
Will from Warwickshire Fire. Have you had any experience through 360 around repositioning people? You mentioned about having the right people in the right places. Have you had any experience in your time doing it where following either 360 or something similar, that people have been identified that actually their skills aren't being best used in that space, whether it's through people or through process and all that? And have you had any experience of then moving people to be better suited into the role that they're then doing?
That'd be a question for you, Gav.
Okay. So I think in answer to that, and it's a really good question, thank you. I think 360 as a tool on its own isn't necessarily going to help you to do that. But it forms part of our leadership and development journey, if you like, and our coaching and mentoring that goes alongside it. So I think where we want to get to with people, and I go back to that earlier point in leadership with self-awareness, is helping them be more self-aware and them actually almost realizing themselves that they're in the wrong position. 360 and some of the leadership tools should not be seen as a performance management tool to move someone out if they're in the wrong role. I think, leadership and that whole development piece is separate from performance management. And we have talked about that a lot recently in the service, because one of the things that we do along leadership is we do run a people management course as well for our first time supervisors. I talked about being courageous and having those conversations. Let's give you some skills to do that first. So when we talked about it, and when you talk about management, when you talk about performance management, a lot of the time you all go to that negative space, because as soon as we put a word management on there, it's like it's something that I've got to deal with. And we've really flipped on its head in Essex, because actually performance management should be celebrated. We should be looking for our high performers. We should be looking for what's best practice, and we should be moving it that way. And as I say, 360 and any leadership tool, in my opinion, isn't something that should be used for poor performance management.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would absolutely agree with that as well. Like, it's got to be part of a system, a process of working with people. But the thing is, like, given the fact that, it is such a safe process, for want of a better word, because you decide who sees that report after you've done the feedback. Obviously, you hope, people are encouraged to share the learning with their line manager, but it will be their choice if they share it. Now, nine out of 10 people do share after they've had it demystified and they understand it's not as threatening as it seems. But it is ultimately up to the individual whether or not they share their report. And it really is a genuinely career-enriching experience, because the way that people do 360s in different ways, but the way that we encourage people to use it, and the way that I know that Kay and Colin's organizations use it, is in a way that is starting off with that person's context, because we can't get anyone to change their behavior unless we explain what's in it for them. There's always going to be, and no matter how, passionate we are about what we do, there's always going to be an element of self-interest, in us changing our behavior. We need to appeal to people. Why would it make the biggest difference to you? Now for some people, getting a 360 and realizing what's required of them to move to the next level will help them to understand, actually, perhaps leadership isn't for me, or perhaps I don't want to be a leader of more people. So the 360 sessions are always starting with, tell me about you. What are your hopes? What are your aspirations? What do you love about your job? What is frustrating? And then you're kind of helping that person to learn more about themselves, that they are better equipped to make decisions about that. Because we say very, very strongly, anybody can be a good leader if they want to be. Because it is as those of you, all of us who you did it, particularly the more formal and the more senior, it can be more taxing. So if it isn't the right job for you, and it might be an opportunity to talk about it with someone objective for the first time, but like Kay says, it's absolutely not going to be the full picture. So
I have a question about operations. So in terms of leadership on the fire ground, there's a clear sense of how that's measured and dealt with within the chain of command. When we're talking about leadership here, 360, does that involve everything outside of the fire ground, or does it include the fire ground in terms of those people who are operational? And is your 360 being done by all staff across your organisations, regardless of their rank status? So do you perhaps help explain that for our audience and for me?
Do you want me to say that?
I don't mind in the middle.
I think it's all linked up for me, and it's not possible to just say we're dealing with anything non-operational when we're talking about this type of leadership. There's different leadership on a fire ground. Different leadership styles come to the fore on the fire ground because they have to. We're in time critical situations, so maybe there's a stronger authoritarian leader that comes to the fore at that point. But it's those same leaders on the fire ground that are the leaders in the organisation after the fire's out, after the incident's out, who have to deal with the people side of what's going on. So it all has to be linked up to me, and better leaders outside of the operational context means better leaders for me inside the operational context as well. And you can't lose for me with this. A better leader is a better leader.
And I think from our point of view, to answer your question, it is all leaders across the service. So we have aspiring firefighters that want to go into crew manager role, will do the 360. That's where their development journey starts. And as I said earlier, our SLT, so even our exec board, are doing that 360. In terms of leadership, absolutely right. On the operational ground, it's very directional. And that's a big, important part of the job. But actually, they are going to come back and they are going to manage big teams. And you've got to think about well-being. You've got to think about culture. So again, going back to my earlier point, leadership isn't just that one thing.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, and in my experience, the sort of operational command side of the fire service seems to be pretty strong already, and it's more the sort of like Colin said, everything that happens outside of that is a bit where there is perhaps more need for support and development, and a huge opportunity for fire services to get even more engaged, collaborative, motivated workforces. So yeah, it's like from what I understand, because of course I'm not the expert in this context, but from working with military or police or all those different sectors, it's the way that you lead when you're not in the thick of things is what influences how able you are to lead in. I guess just repeating what you just said. Both of you. Yeah.
Okay, so I think it's really interesting that we have Cumbria and Essex in this session, both of whom are led by police, fire and crime commissioners. Essex, one's the very first. In fact, I think the first, Roger Hurst, for reasons where culture was a real issue in your organisation 8-9 years ago. And you've come an awful long way to the point at which Cumbria is saying we lag behind you in terms of our development. Is there something about coming out of a very difficult time to all these years later to be able to achieve what you've achieved? Is there something about coming out of that, growing back stronger? Could you give us some sense of what that's been like? Were you around in the organisation at that time?
No, see, I wasn't around at that point. So I've only been with the service for 5.5 years. But I can talk about our journey in the last 5.5 years and how it's evolved. And it's not just a one thing. And I would say that some of the key messages is we have a service leadership team that are absolutely behind leadership and the actions support what they say. We do an awful lot with our people. So we will have things like the One Survey, we will have employee surveys. We actually give it back to our employees as part of that culture piece to say, have your say. And that's actually led by operational colleagues. And we have a lot of station visits going on. It's very accessible. So whilst you have to have that structure in place, our service leadership team are very accessible to all and are very happy to have those open conversations, and they will offer mentoring to others.
So they set the tone from the top, which is the phrase that's ringing around my head as you're talking. It's about your leaders buying into this approach. So in Cumbria, you have a new leader. You have Paul Hancock coming back to the fire service. He's extremely experienced. He's probably come 40 plus years. Previous leader of Chief Fire Officers Association before it turned into National Fire Chiefs Council. So that's very different for you. What's that been like, having someone like that coming back? Does that change the leadership tone from the top?
The leadership from the top with Paul is excellent. It's the second time he's been our leader in Cumbria. So he was a shared chief between Cheshire and ourselves for about a year. And actually, for me personally, I noticed the difference both times as soon as we had Paul as a chief. So that individual definitely leads from the top. And he brings a sense of calm to the organisation, literally from the day one that he walks into the organisation. In terms of feeling that there's a direction that we're going in, and that there's somebody with great leadership skills and integrity sat at the top of the organisation. And it's massively important, I think, for me to see that, and it filters down through the organisation very quickly. So if we can keep Paul as long as possible, as he's exited one retirement to come back to us, I don't think we'll have him for very long, but we'll enjoy the time that we've got with him, I'm absolutely sure.
Excellent. Anything from you, Juliette, in terms of leadership and tone from the top?
Oh, well, I mean, that is a dream, isn't it? Is that you get the chief fire officer. I mean, I was at at Finn Monaghan's session yesterday. He's the chief fire officer, South Wales. I think probably people are familiar with him. It was really, wonderful to hear how he spoke so authentically about the importance of people, and not looking up as a leader, but looking at your people and what can you do for them. We work with organisations where sometimes we're brought in by the chief executive or chief fire officer, whatever the equivalent is. And that is when it's, so much easier to change the culture, because if that person is not truly engaged, so often we're brought in by an HR director or, somebody else or the director of resource or something. If the chief, whoever the chief person is not truly engaged in this, you've got much more of an uphill battle to change the culture. So it's, wonderful when they are, like in the case.
Okay. So lined up, of course, with leadership is money. So money is tight in the public services, and often schemes like this get cut when, cutting to the bone. What advice do you have to our audience here today about how you make sure that what you're doing isn't the thing that gets the chop when the budgets go down? How do you kind of build that so it's business as usual, this is core, this is not something you're going to cut? What does that look like for our audience here in terms of advising their own organisations?
I think for us it's really helpful that there's a national direction and drive behind leadership needing to be looked at in the fire service in particular, but driven forwards. That's linked with culture, and that's very helpful to us, and we see the benefits of it straight away as well. I think we also remember perhaps what it would be like to have leadership that is not quite where it should be, and that is not a cheaper version of events, that sometimes is a more expensive version of events. So good leadership has to be at the heart of it, to be honest, all the way through, and it's cost effective. And we need to just remember that schemes like this are what helps to drive that forwards. Cutting it risks moving back to something else, which might be more expensive.
It will help to have HMI on your side. So you've put all your documentation in for HMI, is that right? When do you expect to get
we actually start our desk studies next week.
Right.
We have our interviews in October. This is the third round of HMI that I've been involved in. And actually, we will get our results kind of January time.
And they will be looking specifically at leadership and culture.
Looking specifically at leadership, culture.
Yes.
But to be fair, Essex have invested a lot of time in looking at that anyway, and actually triangulating leadership, culture and inclusion as one piece instead of three separate areas.
Yes.
It's all well combined.
Okay. All right. Having that external view is always helpful in terms of money with politicians as well, I think. Yes. So before I start to wrap us up, is there any more questions from our audience? I think piqued your interest, because I'm going to ask them now to tell you how they go about getting 360 embedded into your organizations. What is the top tip? So you offer the service.
I didn't quite hear what you
to
said.
get 360 into their organizations if they haven't used the kind of approaches that we've talked about here. What's the best way for them to go back to their organizations and talk about to start that conversation? So what would you recommend, Juliette? What should they do?
I would just sort of be thinking about just how much leadership and self-awareness are absolutely interdependent. If you're not aware of your impact, then you cannot be a good leader by definition, because it's all about influencing in a positive way. So I would be sort of, thinking about the cost of not knowing the impact you're having, because as colleagues have said, it can be huge in terms of people's stress, absence, just loss of opportunity to do work better, even with reduced resources, or particularly with reduced resources. So I would be thinking about, what's the business case for people to be invited to reflect on what is the impact they're having, and therefore, how well are they helping to achieve the mission or not? Because that's the bottom line.
Yes.
Are we doing that?
Okay. And Kay, in terms of organisations, you lead on learning and development. Presumably that role exists in all these other services. What conversation should they be having with their L&D lead to start this off?
I think for me, it's the bedrock of any leadership and development that you want to do. As I said, leadership starts with yourself. So it's about that self-awareness. And actually it gives you that grounding to then build your objectives, to build that development, and actually be quite cohesive and consistent across the service, as opposed to just people working in isolation.
Okay. And last word to you, Colin.
I think for us, we were lucky in that our leadership team bought into it very early. So they're the drivers of it for us. We've used different 360 tools in the past. For us, the one that Real World Group have is simple and easy for us to use, and has great credibility behind it, and is easily accepted by people. So, that's been a win for us.
Okay, excellent. And Juliette, are you happy to talk to people afterwards about what you're doing at Real World Group in terms of this whole topic?
I'd love to.
Yes, excellent.
Please, and if, we're always happy to give you free advice as well. My colleague Kirsty is here, and Mark. Mark and our psychologists will very happily talk to you, no obligation, about your challenges and how you can address them, because we're dead passionate about this stuff. Don't feel you have to buy a 360. We will offer you advice for free.
Okay. So I think it's clear from the session this afternoon that there's an approach here that organisations can do to improve their leadership and improve their culture. It's a conversation for you to go back to your own organisations with and start talking to people, back to your line manager, the people in learning and development, maybe HR, and start that conversation and see look at what your leader is doing around culture. Are they the person leading from the top, and what's that tone look like? It's okay to have those conversations. So thank you so much for joining us at the show. We're really grateful for your time and your expertise and your experience. It's part of what makes the show amazing. So thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. Remember that by taking time to learn from our speakers, you can earn CPD points from our partner CPDme. So do check out the link in the show notes. Our thanks to MSA Safety for their continued support for our podcast, and to Smart Digital for producing this series. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to For Every Response, the podcast from Emergency Services Times.